Slow down. Lay your burden down.
Hey, welcome to Divergent Paths with Dan Dunford. I am Dan Dunford, the host of said podcast. Welcome to week 18 of this music / interview / artistic journey. It's the end of the year, so you kind of do your reflecting and such, and it's been pretty crazy starting this and keeping it going, and a lot more great stuff to come. I'm really excited, etc. This isn't I mean, there's still another episode coming out before the new year hits, but hey, but this week is Christmas, so happy holidays, everybody. Hope you're doing something nice with or without family, as the case may be. It's my first year not going home, which is weird, even though I don't know how much Georgia is really home. It's my parents, which is cool, but I don't have any friends who live there. So after a few days, it's kind of... Sorry, Mom, if you're listening. Don't mean to be offended. Don't mean to offend. Anyway, yeah, so I'm staying in the city for Christmas. And as has been commented on, it's very warm here. I don't know what the deal with that is. I mean, not today necessarily, but later in the week, it's going to be like 60 degrees on Christmas. Who likes that? It's New York. It should be snowing. But anyway, so this week's episode is my good friend, David White. He's an extremely talented bass player, electric stand-up. I met him on a show I don't know, about a year and a half ago, and we hit it off, and he's, always working, always doing a lot of stuff, and he's a really good bass player and a cool guy to hang with. I wanted to talk to him because he has a decent amount of experience touring, a good amount of experience, rather, touring the country with different musicals. And I wanted to talk to him about that. And another interesting thing about David is that he left school, after 2 years, never finished a degree, and has been working in New York ever since. And I kind of wanted to talk to him about kind of academic philosophies and that kind of stuff. So it ends up being a good talk. David's been on tours with Guys and Dolls, and with he's been out with the producers. But and big thing for him, he just booked the first national tour of Bridges in Madison County. Will be happening sometime next year. So that's he's doing a lot of cool stuff. So hope you enjoy our talk. It was a fun one, very free and easy. He's also a podcast listener, so he gets the format. We have a good good back and forth. For me personally, I'll be doing a couple performances with the Garden State Philharmonic out in Passaic, New Jersey this week, which yay. Your typical Christmas giggery, playing a couple masses on Christmas, which is nice. And then, also Wednesday's my birthday. Hooray! That's exciting for everyone, I guess, or maybe just for me. So, happy birthday to me. But yeah, if you are randomly in New Jersey, come hear the Garden State Philharmonic play, I guess. But anyway, so iTunes, Stitcher, Divergent Paths with Dan Dunford. Listen, subscribe, share, review, do things. I don't know, but I like doing this, and I want more people to hear it. So I'm starting to build a little positive word of mouth here and there. People have been sharing, so keep doing that. It's awesome. And so yeah, enjoy the interview. this is orientation week for the new semester, and
God.
I'm working like 60 hours this week. 'Cause
That
I'm
sounds so fun.
coordinating student workers and
That's what
doing
my girlfriend's doing.
giving tours and all this stuff, and then I've been recording
Every night.
every night, and I have a gig tomorrow, a rehearsal for a gig tomorrow night after work, and I'm just Saturday I finally have a day off.
Oh, I understand.
First time in 2.5 weeks, and I'm looking forward to just doing nothing.
When I was working at Federa, I used to be up at 6:30 every morning, and
that was the place. The
yeah,
music
and
shop,
it's in Sunset Park,
right.
and I'd be up at 6. And I'd go from the Heights all the way out to Brooklyn. I'd be done with work at like 4:30, then go back into Midtown and have like, it'd be that awkward thing where rehearsal wouldn't start till 7. So I'd sit in a pizza shop for like an hour, then rehearse from like 7 to 10 p.m. and then go back up, which took me an hour at that time of night, go to sleep. And I'd be asleep at midnight and then be back up at 6.
So, David, you work, and you work a lot.
Yes.
You work your butt off. Recently, a lot of what you've been doing, and what you will be doing in the near future, is these Broadway national tours, and that's like a, I know several people who have done this thing, and it's it's something that I'd like to do. In the future, because I love playing shows. I mean,
Right.
Even though you have the challenge of playing the same thing every night on the road for how long? You were just a few months ago came off Guys and Dolls.
Right.
How many shows was that?
Oh, 114, I think. And that's actually nothing for most tours. A lot, that was only a couple of months. Most of the tours will be like 300-400 shows, and I mean they're out for like an entire year. Guys and Dolls was like about 6 months, but we would do like 3 weeks out and then a week off, and then 3 weeks out and then a week off, and then we had a span of like 2.5 months out straight, which is hard when you're doing a bunch of one-nighters and stuff.
Yeah.
But I have friends that are out with some shows that do like 7 months. And they never get to go home. The plus to that is that they're in one city for a couple of weeks. So it's like you're in San Francisco for 3 weeks.
Yeah, that's not a bad city to be stuck in.
As opposed to like, well, I'm in, I don't know, Albuquerque for 4 days. And that's when you're like, oh wow, it's nice to be in the same theater every night.
Could you move the mic towards the edge of the table?
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's better. I'm getting a little too much echo, but anyway,
always
all things to deal with later. And this is all gonna get edited out. Hooray!
Yay!
So, we met, we met right before you actually got the call to do the tour.
Yeah.
Like we were in rehearsal for.
I was like, when was that?
This would have been November.
Early
to mid-November.
I remember it was cold.
Yeah, it was cold.
That's all I
It's
really
just
remember.
a blur the past year.
Yeah.
So we met. We met last November, right around the time you got the call. Now this was your first tour, right?
No, this was my
it's not.
second.
Second.
Yeah.
Sorry, I remember. I misremember things.
No, I barely remember my own name. So that's fine.
So what was the other one you did?
Hair.
Of course, we talked about that.
It's like the dichotomy between those two, of like the hippie musical where I'm on stage in like a paisley outfit with like peace medallions and crap. And then Guys and Dolls.
And being surrounded by naked people.
Yes, and then Guys and Dolls where it's like everybody dance and sing along. And
yeah. So, this tours are kind of in both musicians' careers and in singers' careers. They're correct me if I'm wrong. I believe they're kind of seen as a stepping stone to eventually
most people like you. It's a stepping stone to greater success as a
You're
as a
right.
freelancer, particularly in New York, but in other places as
agree.
well. So it is. Do you feel it's working for you?
Yes and no.
I mean, because even though like you to go and do off Broadway shows, like I've done off Broadway and off Broadway.
Right.
I was doing a run of Pajama Game with gallery players out,
Right.
out in
Yeah,
Park
yeah,
Slope,
yeah.
which is a good theater, and it was a good performance. But like the cast, it was littered with people who were a little past their prime and had done several tours and had some good credits, but they never quite hit it
Yeah.
just right and weren't able to, and now they're in their late 30s, early 40s, and at this point it's probably not going to happen for you.
Well, yes and no.
There are exceptions,
Yeah, yeah.
but it didn't seem like, now they're doing their other things and they do this on the side. So, do you think about that when you get offered a tour? Is this like, oh, well, this is going to lead to the next big thing?
I mean, it pops into your head. Mm-hmm. I'm not gonna lie. I feel like what I need to do is establish some I don't know, ground rules is the wrong word. Some general knowledge things. So like the tours that I have been doing are non-union, and that's for the cast and the orchestra. Now, the guys working backstage are in IATSE, which is the backstage union, and then there's different offshoots of that with people that are unionized, stage managers and choreographers and blah blah blah. So the non-union touring circuit, generally, I mean, obviously it's in the name that you're not in the union, but then generally, they used to be called bus and truck tours, and a lot of those tours will go to a city for a night or two, or they'll do 5 shows in a weekend. So you're traveling a lot, and it's especially hard on brass players. You guys get run through the ringer. So
no, what are you talking about?
Yeah, right.
Broadway books are easy.
Yeah, with our lead trumpet players are never exhausted. But so a normal week might be you wake up Monday at 9 a.m. and you get your bus calls at 9:30, so you hustle downstairs, you shower, and you eat breakfast at the hotel. You get on the bus, and you might drive for 4 or 5 hours from, say, Pennsylvania to West Virginia. You get to the hotel about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You go in, and you shit and shower, and you get yourself together enough to go play the show, and the bus call is normally at 5:30. You'll go into the new theater, and the crew has traveled overnight, and they've set the whole stage up, all the backdrops, all the flying pieces, all the props, and you come in, and the cast will get a walkthrough of the new theater. So if anything has changed, if they had to cut any scenery, if there's what are called crossovers where you have to go from stage right to stage left, like if you had some older theaters, you have to go underneath the stage. Some, actually, a couple of the theaters you have to go outside to go around, or like things of that nature, or like there's no center aisle if they have to come through the audience, all sorts of that kind of stuff. While they're doing that, the orchestra will be down setting up and getting warmed up, and then there'll be an orchestra sound check, and then they'll bring the cast in to a cast sound check, and then it's half hour when they open the house. Mm-hmm. And basically, you go change in your blacks, you grab a cup of coffee, and then you play the show, and that's your Monday night. Mm-hmm. You go back to the hotel, you sleep, you're up at 7 or 8 o'clock the next morning, you get on the bus, and you do the same thing.
You drive
all over again.
You drive to Southern Virginia.
Yeah, exactly.
Wherever,
right? And some of the drives are a lot easier, especially for some reason we're in Southern California, or excuse me, Florida rather. Very different places. So it's like, Naples to Fort Myers is really not that far, and that's a little easier. All that being said, the non-union tours tend to have many more schedules like that. The unionized tours, There's rules about how many days off you have to get before you can travel. There's obviously a minimum that you can get paid, and then you have a stipend for your instrument, to buy strings, to buy mouthpieces. But not that you're buying a million of those, but you know what I'm saying. And then
How many trumpet players have you met?
Yeah, right. But then you pay into, your insurance gets paid into,
right.
And the other big difference between non-union and union tours. So non-union tours, generally the hotel room is taken care of for you. You basically get shuffled into wherever you need to go. It's actually kind of like, when old people go on those bus tours to like Gatlinburg. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yes,
it's kind of what it's like. But the union tours, and you get a per diem on both, which is a set amount of money each day to basically feed yourself.
Right.
But on the union tours, your per diem might be $150, $200 a day. The difference, though, is that they don't book hotels for you. They might call ahead to the next, like say you're in Detroit for a week and a half. They'll set up a special group rate with a hotel there.
But you have to cover that yourself.
But you have to pay for that out of pocket. So what a lot of the guys will do is, like, if you're in San Francisco for 4 weeks, they'll go rent a room and they'll all chip in on a rental car and they live in an apartment for 4 weeks.
And pocket the per diem, right.
Exactly.
Of course.
So, I mean, that's the big difference is really just, it's a pay level and how long you're sitting in, quote, A-list cities.
Mm-hmm.
The non-union tours that I've been doing are like your Paducah, Kentuckys, your Augusta, Georgias, those kinds of.
How dare you speak about my parents' hometown like that? Augusta is a high class
through the roof. But you get what I'm saying. So the non-union tours are what I've been working on.
And so, but because there are still, I'm guessing, you're not a member of the union?
No, I am.
So they have union members. It's just, it's not run by the union.
It's different. The musicians union,
and they can put you through the ringer because you're
right. Well, and I mean, the difference is, AFM is very different from Equity, because Equity, if you are in Equity or SAG, Screen Actors Guild, you can't do a non-union thing.
Right.
Period. AFM doesn't really care.
I mean, if you're doing a union gig, you'll be protected.
Exactly.
But if they know just as well as everyone else.
Well, and AFM is not the same as those where you have to collect points in order to join the union. Right. AFM is just, you pay $55, $56
a quarter.
Yeah, a quarter. And you're in, and your name gets put in the book, and there you go, and you're done. So if I went to them and said, hey, I'm in your union and these people aren't treating me right, they might have my back a little bit, but it'd probably boil down to, well, you signed a contract, so sorry for your luck kind of situation.
Did you run into any problems where you would have to do that?
No, I joined the union when I first came here because for some reason I thought I naively thought that I was gonna, start subbing right away because I thought that was easier to get into.
It's so easy to sub.
So easy. So I joined and I paid my thing, and I don't know. I just kept paying it. I've never run into a situation where I've had to call the union before. Mm-hmm. What I will say that's very valuable, especially for freelancers, especially looking in Broadway, is every person has a phone number, email, and their address is listed in that book. Mm-hmm. And it's literally a big, gross, kind of purple book that Sam Ash pretty much pays to put out every year. That has everyone that's in the union listed. So if you're looking to reach out to people, some of these guys might be in their 60s and they're not on Facebook or they're not hip to whatever new technology. You can find an email address and you can contact them, and that gets into another conversation. But that's the big thing that I was like, oh, okay. And then you get the Union Mag, which has all of the auditions for orchestras,
and you get the emails that only go out to union members.
Exactly, and then there's the no work lists and thing like that. So you're able to see like, oh, I should avoid this company or whatever,
Okay. Yeah.
So there is a lot of valuable information, and AFM is really not that expensive. And you don't really need to.
That's like what that's. Well, since it's New York, that's like 6 or 7 beers a quarter that you don't drink.
Exactly. Well, I will say the nice thing about it is actually having the union card, because when I fly a lot,
Oh, of course.
I
yeah.
always carry. I have a printed out sheet of the new FAA regulations about carrying on instruments, and you'd be amazed at how much more seriously they take you if you show them American Federation of Musicians Local 802 and your number and a printout of that, and be like, no, I'm taking my instrument on.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Like your business guy's roller bag is going to have to go under the seat. My apologies.
Yeah, I mean, and that's I mean, over the past few years, of course, there's always been, horror stories and stuff, but
Right.
recently with Facebook, people have been passing around pictures of what happened to their guitars, what happened to their cellos, what happened to their string basses.
Yeah.
And it's terrifying to think that you might have in case of a string bass, you might have an instrument that's worth tens, and in some cases even hundreds of thousands of dollars that
Right.
the airline just absolutely destroys. And sure, you might be insured, and but you're not going to you're not going to find that instrument, especially if you've been playing on it for a long time.
Well, it's a rock and a hard place, because my personal opinion is if you're stupid enough to fly with a $90,000 instrument,
That's fair.
that's your own fault.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like,
and generally those people are, when they're flying if they're flying with that instrument, they're flying with an orchestra, and they have special lockers.
Well, yeah,
flight lockers
and
for those things.
most orchestral guys, that's they'll have 9 or 10 bass flight cases, and that'll get booked through a shipping company, and you don't even have to.
Right.
You just show up, and your bass is at the next place.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the same with being on the road with the union tours. I don't tout my bass around. I show up and it's sitting by my stool in the pit, which is so nice. especially living in the city, having to lug around my bass. Oh man, just showing up and it's there and it's ready to go.
You really should look into spending all of your money on Uber instead of taking the train.
God, yeah. Right.
So let's. You're from Cincinnati.
Columbus.
You're from Columbus.
It's funny. Everybody here thinks I'm from Cincinnati. And
Same thing. I knew that you were from Columbus, and I just said Cincinnati.
It's all C cities, because everybody in college used to think I was from Cleveland.
Right.
Because nothing really happens in Columbus except for like insurance
companies.
companies.
I just had someone in here who was from Cincinnati, so that's kind of like,
Well, and especially in classical world, everybody goes to CCM, so it's
CCM, CIM.
A lot of people.
I mean, Columbus. Some people do go to Columbus State, but not that many. Comparatively.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, if you're a music educator, you go through OSU. That's just a given. But yes, I'm from Columbus.
So, what? I mean, your electric bass. I mean, from Ohio.
The spiel. Who am I? How did I?
Here's the problem with talking to you. You know everything that I'm doing because you're a regular podcast listener. So I'm kind of like, you can just be like, oh, now he's gonna do this.
No, it's fine.
But just like, your parents musicians, or you just like,
Yeah. So I was born in Michigan, and we moved to Ohio when I was very young, like 4 or 5. And we moved to Columbus because my dad got a teaching position at a school called Otterbein University, and he is a lighting designer. So he got a job teaching I guess it's technically theatrical design, teaching down there in a small school in Westerville where I grew up. And my mom is a choir teacher and obviously plays piano, and my dad plays guitar. So I grew up in a musical household. But what's funny is I railed against it for so long because...
And by it, you mean...
Being a musician. I swore up and down I was going to play hockey, and I played hockey very, very seriously up until about sophomore year of high school, when I could fight the bug no longer, because my friends were at home, like practicing wrist shots in the basement.
Food.
Oh, no worries.
Or bathroom. No. Okay.
Anyway, I fought being a musician for so long because And I gave up because my friends were downstairs practicing wrist shots and I was practicing bass. So I kind of was like, well, okay, I should listen to my gut on this one. And, obviously trying to get employed as a hockey player is just about as hard as getting employed as a freelance bassist. So,
well, I mean, but so, what, your dad was, was involved in a obviously you played electric bass. You're never, you didn't start out as a classical guy.
I did. I was going to say, I meant to go into this. So what happened was I was about 7 or 8 years old, and my parents, I wouldn't say I grew up in a particularly religious family, but we went to church every week.
And the Midwest, I mean, that's the Midwest Bible Belt.
Yeah, and especially Ohio, German Catholic, it's everybody goes to church. Anyway, so my mom played piano at church, my dad played guitar, and I was about 7 or 8 years old, and I was young enough that I still had to sit around with them, and I couldn't go out in the congregation. So somebody, I don't even remember who it was, just handed me a shaker and said, "Here, kid, play this." Mm-hmm. And I just kind of started doing it. And I started as a drummer.
So, right, you...
Oh, yeah. So I was like 7 or 8, and somebody handed me a shaker and said, "Play this." And I did. Anyway, so I started playing drums, was the first thing. And I played, there was like hand percussion and stuff in church. And I started as a drummer. And I was about 9. And I was my parents bought me some crappy like $250 export Ludwig, and we had an unfinished basement, and they put a bunch of carpet around and said, "Here, kid, go nuts," kind of thing. And I was playing drums, and I thought that was it for me. But 6th grade rolled around, and in my school, you couldn't pick percussion your first year. You had to have a melodic instrument, and if you were percussionist, you had to play on a Glock the whole first year. So you had to learn the notes and everything. You couldn't just play snare drum, which looking back was an invaluable thing. But so it was the first year that my school had a string orchestra program starting. And me being the guy that I am, I saw a bass and was like, I want to play that because it's the biggest thing that there is. And I started playing it, and I kind of, it's cliche, but I just kind of, I took to it really quickly.
There's something very satisfying about being the foundation of an ensemble.
Yeah. Well, and making everybody has to listen down.
Exactly.
That's like band wind ensemble 101.
Got to build the triangle.
Yeah, listen down and then you go up. But but at the time I was still playing bass, but I was still playing drums and studying percussion. And I did that about all the way through middle school. What I was saying, I was in high school. And I was playing bass seriously and studying percussion seriously. And I played on the drum line, and I was in the percussion section in the wind ensemble, but then I was also playing bass, and I was also singing in the a cappella choir and in music theory.
Really? This was the guy who didn't want to be a musician, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I tried really hard. But yeah, about my sophomore year when I quit the hockey thing, I kind of realized that like I enjoyed being a percussionist, but bass was really where my heart was. So I started to take that more seriously and looking at colleges and things like that. And God bless my high school music department, because my band teacher, Mr. Falk, pretty much kind of just let me do my thing. Mm-hmm. Like I'd be there, in the practice rooms at lunch, just playing, and skip lunch, and he'd do that thing where he'd sign that I was, give me a note as to why I was there and all that crap. But they let me be in everything, and it was a relatively small music department. It was big for the school that we were in, but they just kind of let me do my thing, and it was the reason I kind of went down that path. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But around getting back into why I started theater, I was 14, and obviously since my dad is a lighting designer, I grew up I grew up in theater, and I remember when I was a little kid, we would go to these things called light hangs or focuses, where he'd be setting up all of the light cues for the show, and somebody has to go on stage and basically stand in specific spots so they can focus the light exactly where it needs to go. And it would be one of those, okay, David, if you do this, you'll get a Happy Meal kind of thing. So it would be like, he'd be like, you know, like, and I'm like 7 years old, and he'd be like, David, go a little farther up stage. No, a little farther down. Go a little bit stage left there. No, stay there. You know, you see that spike over to your right a little bit, stay there. Like, so I knew all the terminology, and I grew up in theater, and I was playing bass pretty seriously. And the school that my dad taught at the time, it's gotten a lot better since, didn't really have a very good music department. It was kind of a fog the mirror kind of place. And there was like maybe 10 performance majors in the whole school. It's a small private college in Ohio.
You fill it in with people who are just interested.
Exactly. So they needed a bass player for this children's show, which was You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. And the
70s version or the more recent one?
The more recent one.
The 99.
Yeah, whatever the revival was.
Yeah.
And he's now the chair of the music department. Dr. Davenport said, you know, does David want to do this? Basically, it's kind of like, you know, I'm going to hire a bass player anyways, but I'd like to give him a shot. And God bless Dennis Davenport, because he's the reason that I got into that whole thing. And I worked my butt off, and at the time I had just started playing upright, and I was playing electric, and it was a double show, and I got to work with professional musicians, and it was, you know, like a big deal for me that I was being taken seriously. I wasn't being treated like a kid. You know, I was 14 at the time. And
there's a two-edged sword with that. Like you get treated like a professional, but then you have to behave like a professional.
Exactly. You know, and I would be mortified because my bedtime was like 10 o'clock. So my dad would take me out of tech rehearsals early because I had to go home and go to bed. But, you know, it was at the time, it was that thing of like, okay, guys, he's still 14. Like, we can treat him professional, and he's gonna hang in there, but he's still 14.
so maybe not so much of the
exactly. So
the shop talk that when it gets dirty.
Right. So they gave me that shot, and as far as I can remember, I did pretty well. I mean, it's kind of a blur now. It was 10 years ago, but I started playing for their productions, and Otterbein has actually produced a lot of really great actors.
And that's Otterbein College.
Otterbein University. In Westerville.
Right.
They were named something different. They just changed the university. It's all semantics, quite frankly.
Right.
Anyway, but they would bring in outside directors, and they were hiring in local union musicians to play these shows.
And then you're still there.
And then I'm this high school kid playing the bass book.
Right.
So I grew up doing a lot of those shows with, you know, heavy guys that were teaching at the local universities, who had their doctorates, who had their masters, and I was kind of being thrown into the fray while still being in high school.
So, in a situation like that, you're obviously forced to, like, up your game really fast.
Yeah.
What were some of the other shows you did while you were there?
Let's see, what else did I do? Company.
I mean, Company's a hard show.
Yeah, well, it's Sondheim, and I was like 15, and it was the hardest book I had read. And as far as Sondheim shows, it's actually one of the easier to put together because it's a lot more poppy. There's not as many terrible hemiolas as some of the other shows.
Oh, Sweeney Todd.
Oh yeah. But so we did like Company. We did this show 9. We did Peter Pan.
So
Smokey Joe's Cafe,
right? So the point,
the whole spectrum,
right? And you've been playing bass for just a few years.
Yeah, I started playing bass when I was 12, so I was like 2 or 3 years into playing the instrument.
So like,
and I was getting paid, and I was in high school, and like I had to like sign out of school to go play matinees, and like had to get letters from the university requesting the school to let me free for this performance, and but it was the hands down the most invaluable training that I got. Basically just being like, we don't care that you're 16 and in high school. Like, here's the book, play it right, cash the check kind of thing. Yeah.
Wow. If you could put freelancing into one sentence.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, it was,
So now you did that through high school, and then you, after that, you went off to college.
Yes.
You went to Berkeley in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And so did the fact that you were doing this in high school and getting paid, I mean, I'm sure the money wasn't great, but it was,
Actually, it was
better than stuff you've done.
Yeah, it was better than working a day job and scooping ice cream in high school. But
Yeah. So like, did that lend itself to you being in like, well, let's just set this up. Like you went to Berkeley,
right?
And you only spent 2 years there before being like, I'm out, and you moved to New York then,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Well, no, I did a cruise ship gig.
Okay.
Then after the cruise ship gig, I moved to New York.
So cruise ship New York. I mean,
yeah.
So did like that early experiences of spending 4 years in high school, like you're really doing it. You're actually being learning all this stuff about being a freelancer and
mm-hmm.
being a good professional musician and not showing up prepared and all this stuff.
Right.
This is all on the job training. So did that contribute to, like, when you got to college, did you find yourself just being like impatient with the whole process? Or I'm just curious if that had it, that kind of fostered that.
Yes and no. Berkeley is, I feel like you can say this about any school, but it is especially true about Berkeley. It is a place where it is what you make of it.
Mm-hmm. And it has a reputation of being a very, it has a good music program, but it's definitely gears its students into more commercial direction.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, well, I'll say this. So when I started playing bass, it was all classical, looking at the page, playing what's on the page. And then when I got into theater, it was even more of that.
Right.
In my spare time, I had this little area down in my basement in my house growing up where I would just learn as many tunes as I could. The problem was I didn't know what I was playing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I knew notes and I could read really, really well, but I couldn't tell you why this B flat worked over this chord or what, like I knew my major scales. I didn't know any of my modes, but I could play you the tune back. So coming to Berkeley, a lot of what my problem was if you put something in front of me, I could read it, no problem. If you told me to play a Mixolydian mode, I'd be like, what the fuck is that? There's these things called modes. I thought they were just scales, kind of thing. So a lot of my time, at least the first year or so, was just playing catch up with learning theory and learning my fretboard and learning why this works. Like over 7 chords. I didn't understand sevenths or like basic music theory. I didn't understand the difference between major and minor chords, but I could, if you played them, I could play over top of them, but I couldn't tell you why this worked.
Right.
So that was a lot of my first year. But what was working to my advantage was Berkeley has a very well-known film scoring program.
Right.
And, I got a scholarship, and basically Berkeley says, look, you need to do X, Y, and Z to keep your scholarship. And I got into doing film scoring because I could play with a bow and I could read.
Right.
Which a lot of guys at Berkeley couldn't do, which is a discussion for another day. But so I kind of started doing that. But like I said, my years there were a lot of just playing catch up.
So when you moved into your second year, like why did you end up just being like?
Well, so I was a performance major for my short time there, and I was in a band and doing that kind of thing and playing around a lot. And Berkeley is relatively close to New York, so I would be commuting down here to play and all that kind of stuff. And being a performance major, I'm not gonna lie. Part of the motivation for me leaving was I didn't particularly want to do recitals. I didn't really want to do the work, but the bigger problem for me was I didn't see the value in getting a piece of paper that said I know how to play my instrument when I was already out gigging all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a discussion with my one of my bass teachers, Anthony Vitti, who basically said, look, school's always going to be here. Like, if you want to go play, go play. You don't need to spend another 2 years here to get a piece of paper
that you'll be paying for until you're 60.
Yeah, but I mean, he's like, I'm never going to encourage you. Like, yes, drop out. No teacher worth their salt's going to say that. But he did say, look, if you want to go play, go play. We're still going to be here, kind of thing. So I did. And I left school after 2 years, along with most everybody else that has ever gone to Berkeley. Because the thing about Berkeley is they consider you an alumni if you've spent one semester there. Right?
See, they still
so like
John
Mayer spent a semester and a half there.
Right.
And he's considered an alumni. They know how to work the system.
Although how is that different than an athlete going to a professional
Exactly.
league? And in football, every nationally televised football game, you have the guys, the little vignettes of the guys saying the school, and
right.
And outside of, outside of a select group, there aren't that many people that have finished.
Yeah,
like almost none of them have finished.
And
but they're from that school.
I also the big thing, and you have to understand this about me personally. I was never a good student, and I hated school in general. Mm-hmm. I didn't like academic environments. I didn't see the value in them. I do a little bit more now, but I didn't feel for what I was looking to do that I was getting properly prepared. Mm-hmm. And that's not anybody in particular's fault.
It's a difficult thing because the music business changes every year, and
right.
And it's hard to create a curriculum that works. You can't. Well, it's almost impossible to create a curriculum that works for everyone because everyone has different reasons for doing what they do. There's different backgrounds, and it's how.
Right.
Have you had any issues where the fact that you don't have a degree has hurt you?
I don't think it's hurt. Well, I take that back. I haven't run into them yet, but I know I will. Mm-hmm. Teaching,
of course,
if I ever want to get into them, is obviously a big thing. That's really the only thing that I've noticed, that if I ever wanted to go and teach adjunct at a school, that might hinder me. I've never been in a situation where you're on the bandstand and they're like, "Where'd you go?" Or, "Do you have a degree?" Because no one cares. It's just like, "Can you play?" Great, kind of thing.
Here's your money.
Well, but the other thing is too, like, there's this weird thing against Berkeley where, if you go there, I tend not to tell people that I went there because there is an odd thing. They think if you went to Berkeley, you're hardcore jazzer, and you can't just play groove, especially as a bass player.
Oh, and in classical circles, if you say that you went to Berkeley, they're going to assume that you can barely play. They're going to be like,
people are going to laugh. Whatever. Yeah, they're going to laugh in your face. But there's also some merit to that, to be quite frank, because playing in the film scoring sessions, it was like me and one other kid who could play bass, but then we'd be hiring NEC or BOCO kids to come play the string parts,
Fair enough.
So, I mean, it's not a place to go if you were a classical musician. Period. I would tell it, like, especially string players, if you want to go play like fiddle or traditional music, that's a great place to go. If you want to play concertos, don't go there. Period.
Yeah. No, fair enough.
Yeah. So it was just, the long and the short of it was, I didn't feel like I was getting the education that I wanted.
Then let me take a different tack on that same question. Have you ever run into any issues musically where you think that you would have been helped by spending and finishing your time there? Because part of the draw of a music school setting is that you are given that 4-year period to hone your craft?
Well, this gets into a different conversation. The reason why I say that is I was lucky that because I was working as a professional from a younger age, I was able to develop my voice on the instrument a lot earlier than most people.
And that's something that a lot of times when you're at a school, and I've actually run into places where people where they actually said this to me is, you can develop your voice later. Learn what I'm telling you right now, and be able to do exactly note perfect what's on the page, and then you can add in the musicality later. And I strongly disagree with that, but I'm interested to.
Well, that's to be fair. I feel like there's some merit to that when you're talking in the classical sense. There is something to be said for learning the repertoire of your instrument and understanding those challenges and not having total control of your instrument. Because I feel like that's a prerequisite before you can develop a voice, is being able to hear that the instrument, you're not fighting the instrument, whatever it may be, to feel like you have total mastery and total comfort with it. Then you're able to develop your own specific thing. I don't feel like I'm ever going to have total mastery of my instrument. I feel like that's kind of a healthy way to view it. But I was able to know what it was I did well, and I was able to identify what type of player I was, and I can trace it back to who I was listening to and why I sound the way I do. But I was lucky that I was 17, 18 when I finally felt like, okay, this is what I do. All right, I'm going to stick with this kind of thing. And there's a lot of people that it takes that entire 4 years to figure that out. I mean, and that's in life. Mm-hmm. There's plenty of people that are in graduate school that don't know what they want to do. And I feel like the same holds true for musicians. There's plenty of musicians that have master's degrees that haven't figured out what it is they do well on the instrument and how they sound.
And then they go on and get a performance diploma and try and figure it out some more.
And then they can't figure out why they're not working.
Right. I understand. I see what you're saying. Like, and I think it's a combination of the two.
Absolutely.
Personal opinion, I don't know everything. I don't know even close to everything.
I don't either.
When I look at something like that, I think that I just have heard too many times that like you have to do everything before, and I think that that sometimes puts you in a hole because there are just piles and piles and piles of musicians who play incredibly,
right,
and play perfectly in tune and in time, and those are all very important things, of mm-hmm. course. But it's harder to find musicians, the musicians who are coming out every year, and it's harder to find one who has a unique voice, and that unique voice is what separates you from. I'm not saying don't put off the technique stuff, but right. I think that it's vital to start honing that voice as early as possible. And obviously you're gonna change. Things are gonna change. You're gonna step in potholes and be like, oh shit, that didn't work.
Well,
it puts you ahead of. It can give you a jump start ahead of your peers because you're actually saying things as right. opposed to, oh, you're another really good trombone player or bass player or violinist.
The other thing that we have to acknowledge is that there are specific, especially in brass world, there are things that you're just not going to get until you're older.
Of course.
I mean, just literally the muscles in your face are not going to develop entirely until you're in the middle of your 20s, So there is that to be said. there is a lot of merit, I feel, to learning that repertoire, and especially if you're a classical musician, it's like, of course you got to learn X, Y, and Z piece and this solo and that solo, because if you're going to play in orchestras, that's all you're going to see, you know.
Of course.
And that's where the whole Berklee thing shifts off from the conservatory mindset, because they're trying to prepare you to the best of their ability. To be able to work in pretty much any situation, as opposed to a conservatory where, you know, they've had hundreds of years of music backed up and hundreds of years of orchestral players and soloists who can say, well, this is what worked for me, as opposed to being a freelance musician where that profession is only 100 or so years old, basically. Right. I mean, give or take. But it's like, you know, jazz didn't come into this country until, you know, the early 20th century. And, you know, and that kind of sparked the entire evolution of rock and roll and the blues. And with that came more freelance guys. So we're basing our education system on information that is very young, and especially being an electric bass player, that didn't come out until the 50s.
Right.
That instrument's only 60 years old, as opposed to you're looking at a violin. That's
the actual physical instrument in your hand.
Yeah.
Not even the instrument as a whole. Like the
Yeah.
physical instrument in your hand might be 400 years old.
Yeah. So there is that to be said.
You're absolutely right. And I think, you know, and this is a big part of this whole podcast, like my whole show is based around the idea that you can't limit yourself like that anymore. It just because, you know, you can't. I mean, like you go to a conservatory and they do train you like that, but then you get spit out into the world where and you're left wondering what to do. This comes up. I keep. It feels like every episode I'm like saying something like this where I can't do this anymore. You know,
Right.
I apologize.
No. What I do feel that schools like Berklee, like USC, like Frost, what they are doing well is basically saying that, because like I had to do, when I was on scholarship at Berklee, I had to do these vocal labs where your vocal majors would come in, and there was I think it was like a 4-piece band in a rehearsal room. They would give you a chart, they would play a recording for us, and then they'd have to count off the band and lead the song. And string players would also have to be in labs where like they'd have to learn some country tunes. They'd have to learn a little bit of fiddle. They'd have to learn how to read a rhythm chart. That is one of the things that I feel like Berklee really does teach you well. I mean, there's literally a lab for vocalists on how to use microphones properly. And it's stuff that people don't teach you. I mean, you know, I know tons of great violinists who I couldn't put on a wedding band gig to save their life. You know, they're great people, but it's like they can't play country. All they know how to play is Bach concertos, and that's fine. But, you know, if you want to play in orchestras, that's great. But being a freelance person, it's all about basically making yourself as marketable as possible, realizing that you are a business, and the only way that you're going to stay in business is to make sure that everybody knows you and that everybody can hire you for any situation. Period.
And I think that's what's so exciting about the scene. I hate using that word, but the environment in New York right now is that more and more people are starting to realize that, and they're really musicians are really being like, oh well, I don't want to, if I don't want to move to New Mexico and teach, I really should start doing something about it.
It's also about making your own work. I was watching I have a friend who's in the cast of the Kinky Boots tour, and Billy Porter, who originated one of the roles on Broadway, rejoined them in Pittsburgh. He was doing an interview, and he was saying how he's like, you know, when I'm not there, I'm doing plays in people's apartments. I'm doing plays on the street. And his quote was, if you're not interested in doing a play in somebody's living room, you can't be interested in doing a play on Broadway. And a lot, it's one of the few times I've actually written a quote down, because I think it really speaks to, especially what I'm trying to do, is theater is very difficult. I realize that I have carved myself out a niche, and that it makes trying to center myself on that is incredibly difficult, because it is a very small scene and you are entirely reliant on other people to provide you with work. Mm-hmm. You're relying on contractors, you're relying on MDs, you're relying on composers to hire you. But there's a lot of it that is, there's a lot of the crap. I totally lost my train of thought. You're relying on other people to provide you work, but you have to be able to basically keep yourself busy.
Yeah.
Exactly what you're doing. So, it is very difficult, and it's very unnerving to put yourself out there to say, like, hey, I made a hat. To quote Sondheim, I made a hat. Yeah. Do you like my hat? Please like my hat. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's very unnerving, especially as a freelancer. And I think it's very short-sighted to say, basically, things are just slow right now. It's like, yeah, they are, but you realize what you could be doing right now? Like, for me, it's like, I'm in between tours right now, and I've got some stuff at the end of the month, but I've basically got 3 weeks open right now. And I take that as an opportunity to say, okay, well, you know what? I wanted to brush up on my guitar chops anyway, so I'm going to sit down and really practice that. Or, I'm really going to dive back into that Samandal book this week and really get back up on those etudes that I haven't touched for a couple of years, or whatever. There's so many opportunities for you to be able to challenge yourself outside of being reliant on others, that I don't feel, and I feel like it's a generational thing. I don't feel like there's a lot of freelancers that are willing to put in that amount of work, and to, not just on your instrument, but on the marketing side of things. I mean, we were talking earlier about getting the headshot, getting the website, and realizing that you're a business and you have to sell yourself, as uncomfortable as that possibly could be.
Yeah.
Especially
like, you're from the Midwest. I'm from the South. Like, we're both from cultures where politeness is a very, very valued virtue.
Yeah. And where you could run into me and I'd apologize.
I'd apologize, right. Yeah. And it's something where, and I've run into this marketing my podcast.
Right.
You feel bad for, like, hitting people over the head with what you're doing, but at the same time, like, people miss things. People forget about things, and
Absolutely.
And if they're interested in something, they want to buy what you're selling.
Absolutely. And to your earlier point, it's incredible. I fight that battle all the time, being on the road with people in New York, remembering who the fuck I am, because I could be Joe Schmo. As far as they know. And I'm lucky that I have enough people now that are starting to be like, oh yeah, that kid, yeah, he's a nice guy. That I see myself making the right steps, but not hitting people over the head with who you are and what it is you do is challenging, because you want to be able to sell yourself, but you don't want to piss people off.
Right. Because there's a fine line between them not remembering who you are and them being so aware of who you are that they just don't want to see you ever again.
Exactly. Well, and we live in an age where information is everywhere.
Yeah, it's 5 minutes work per day to, like, to make it, it takes almost no time at all to really put yourself out there in a way that really frustrates people.
Absolutely. And it's, But that being said, you also look like a schmuck if I search your name and I don't at least see a website or a YouTube clip. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
it's what are you gonna do? It's,
Exactly. So it's
See, it's just something you have to continuously work at and
Exactly.
and continue getting feedback from other people.
Exactly.
That kind of stuff. So, so you said you're about to be going out on another tour with
yes, producers.
producers.
Yeah.
Is that a something that you've done before, or
I played the show a long time ago.
Or is it one that you're a big fan of?
Yeah. Oh, I love the show. I'm actually it's the first time I've been
Mel
like.
Brooks.
Well, that's the thing. He's an associate producer on this tour.
Oh man!
So there is a very small possibility that I might actually get to meet him, which I would.
Is it going into one of the bigger cities? Are you going to some big cities?
It's relative bigger than the last tour.
But you'll still do like
I mean it's like
San Francisco, Chicago, or wherever.
Well, we're still hitting. There's some B-list markets, but there's a lot more like Salt Lake Cities, Albuquerque's, Lexington's. So not huge cities, but relatively bigger ones than the last tour which I was on, which was an interesting travel route.
After a while, they all start to look the same.
Yeah, well, I got all sorts of Midwest love, but yeah, there's some parts of like that Ohio to like Illinois strip that just it all looks the same. It's all flat.
It's all just the same cornfield, right?
Pretty, yeah. That's the entire Midwest. Is just there's one guy that owns all those states. Mm-hmm. That's it. Yeah.
So when do you head out on that one?
We start Tex in middle of October. So I go October to like Thanksgiving, and then I actually have the whole month of December off, which is really nice. Like I'll actually be able to see my family and stuff. And then I'm out from like January to middle of March, and then I'm done. It's actually a relatively short tour.
That's 4 or 5 months.
Yeah. It's not too bad, but pays the rent. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the thing is like I do it and I realize that I basically have my rent paid until the end of summer.
Right.
When everything starts to ramp up again anyways. You get through wedding season. You get the money from that, and then you go through wedding season, and then you're going to be okay. Because the fall, if you don't have anything booked up in the fall, can be kind of slow. But yeah. So, I mean, I'm excited to go out on it. I like the show a lot. And actually, most of the guys that were in the Guys and Dolls Orchestra are coming back with that show. So I know most of the guys in the band again, which is nice. There's not that awkward first day of school thing that kind of happens.
Yeah, and you have the familiarity with their playing, and
absolutely.
And everyone will be better.
Well, and you know how they're going to be on the bus, and
Don't sit next to that. No.
Well,
I'm just kidding.
But it's important, man.
Yeah, when you're spending that much time in that close proximity, you gotta. Budget how that works.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the number one thing I tell, because I get an occasional email from people who are like, well, how do I do what you do? And which is a hard question to answer, but it's so much of it is personality, man. Mm-hmm. If you're an asshole, no one's going to work with you. You might get one gig, and then they're going to realize you're a dick, and they're never going to hire you again.
What I was talking to a friend of mine, and he said something about this, and a trombone player, a friend of mine named Rick Becker, and he said the first call, that might be luck, that might be whatever it is.
Yeah.
But guess what? That second call is on you.
Yep, so absolutely.
Don't be an asshole. Don't prepare, show up, play it. Work with people.
It's all playing the game, man. Because it's like,
and you playing the game is often considered a bad thing, but in this situation, it's
how you get work.
Yeah, it can be seen like sometimes people say playing the game as, oh, you're selling out by playing the game. It's like no, in this situation, you're working. You want to be a good person.
Well, it's all about like, it's all about not being a jerk. And it's all about, like, if you can't make the gig, getting someone that is better, or as good as, if not better than you, mm-hmm. and is a good guy. And, because that's the thing is that you realize that the people that you send out when you can't make the gigs make you look just as good as when you're being there. And it is the hardest thing to teach freelancers about, is to just be cool, to be on time, to be prepared, and to not be a jerk. I mean, I feel like that's the recipe to success right there. Just be prepared, be on time, don't be a jerk. I mean,
wait, that's all?
yeah, that's the man. Why aren't I a millionaire yet? No, but it's true. I mean, I'm amazed at how many people that I have met playing on gigs where I'm like, how did you get this? Because it's like, I don't know. Everybody focuses on playing, being a freelancer, but my stance on the thing is like, if your playing is in question, you shouldn't be on the gig in the first place. If any sort of inkling pops into my head about like, if you're good enough, you shouldn't be there. Period. That should be a given. And especially if you're in New York, it's like, if you can't cut it, there's about 60 other people that can.
And they could probably be here tonight.
Exactly. Yeah, because it's like, I know like 3 guys that are just sitting on their couch right now that would be here. So I feel like that's something that is extremely overlooked. Being a freelancer is realizing, I don't know, professional decorum. Like, there's so many guys that I have played with that just like, yeah, they might not be the greatest drummer, guitarist, whoever that I've played with, but they're really fun to hang out with. So of course I'm going to hire them.
And and you're not worried about whether they're going to show up late, unprepared. They're going to be there.
Oh God.
They might not be the tip of the iceberg, but they're really high up on the mountain. And
number one rule that I have found, just be on time. For the love, and if you're not going to be on time, call, let them know. Because I'm the type of guy, like, perfect example, a couple weeks ago, I had to do a gig, but I was coming right from some meeting. And it was like, the meeting ended at 4 and the gig was at like 5 and I had to go across town or something. And I just texted the MD and was like, listen, I'm going to be there on time. But if I'm not there until 3 minutes before rehearsal starts, I'm on my way. I promise. And it's just like, it's amazing how much favor that can buy you. Just keeping people in the loop and trying your best to be on time and being prepared. It's like, man, you can jump the line just by being that kind of a person who is a fucking professional. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Dude, so when you write in your book about this,
about how to be a professional, oh man, it'd be like there'd be so many explicit language stickers on the front of that thing. There'd be so many people that would be so pissed off by what I had to say. It's just, yeah, the reason I feel like I'm at least starting to fit into New York is it's just the pace of it and the no bullshit. And, like I said, just being able to deal with MDs getting in your face, not because they don't like you, but because you only have 3 hours to get through 30 tunes. Mm-hmm. And they're just going to holler at you rather than stop and give you the note nicely. They're going to keep playing. And just,
that's okay.
Yeah. And
just do it.
Just do it. Yeah.
Don't, there's no room to be pissed off or offended or not. You can be pissed off because it's frustrating. But,
yeah, you can be pissed off.
But don't be, being offended by that. They have their asses on the line because this is their product,
Go be pissed off at the bar afterwards.
And
that's my opinion.
And let it go there.
Yeah. If it's a big enough deal to say something, but it's like 9 times out of 10, just take the cash and go home and then don't work for him again. It's
so take the cash and go home. There's your thing for the night.
That's a terrible final thought to end on. Take the cash and go home. Oh God, I sound like such an ass.
No, I think the takeaway is really be professional. And be on time.
Just be a decent guy and
guess what? If you do that, you'll be able to take the cash and go home.
Exactly, and you'll be able to take more cash and go home more often.
Awesome. I think. David, thanks so much for doing this. Man. This has been cool. When you get back from producers, you'll have to come on and just hang out some more and do this again.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Cool.